Part 1. How World War II began. 1918 to 1939. From the ashes of World War I to the rise of Hitler. World War II, the most destructive conflict in human history, did not begin with a single event. Instead, it grew slowly over 20 years, shaped by political mistakes, economic disasters, wounded national pride, and the rise of aggressive dictators. To understand why the world fell back into war just decades after World War I, we have to look at what happened between 1918 and 1939. 1. The end of World War I, a victory with dangerous consequences. In November 1918, World War I ended with Germany defeated and Europe devastated. Millions were dead, empires had collapsed, and entire regions were in ruins. The victors hoped to create a lasting peace, but the choices they made instead planted the seeds for another global conflict. The most important decision came at the Paris Peace Conference, where the Allies argued about how to treat Germany. France wanted harsh punishment to prevent another German attack. Britain wanted Germany weakened, but not destroyed. The United States, led by President Woodrow Wilson, hoped for a fair peace. The final result satisfied no one, and it angered millions. 2. The Treaty of Versailles 1919, a peace designed to fail. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept full responsibility for World War I. This war guilt clause justified the harsh penalties that followed. Germany had to pay enormous reparations, payments so large that economists said it would take a century to finish. The German military was reduced to almost nothing. Germany lost land to France, Poland, Belgium, and Denmark. Germany was forbidden from stationing troops in certain regions. Colonies were taken away and divided between the Allied powers. To the German people, this treaty felt humiliating and unjust. Many believed they had been betrayed by their own leaders rather than defeated on the battlefield. This belief, known as the stab-in-the-back myth, became a powerful tool for extremist groups, especially the Nazis. The treaty created resentment, economic misery, and a desire for revenge. It also weakened Germany so severely that its democracy struggled to survive. 3. The collapse of old empires and the birth of new nations. World War I did not only defeat Germany, it destroyed four major empires: the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire. In their place came new countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and others. But these borders were drawn quickly, often ignoring ethnic, cultural, or historical realities. Many people suddenly found themselves living in countries they didn't identify with. Nationalist tensions grew in Central and Eastern Europe, creating small conflicts that would later explode into much bigger ones. The Russian Revolution and the rise of the Soviet Union. In 1917, the Bolsheviks overthrew the Russian government and created the world's first communist state. The new Soviet Union terrified many European countries, especially those that feared communism spreading to their borders. This fear pushed some nations to support strong, authoritarian leaders who promised to block communism at any cost. Fascism, in part, grew as a reaction to the rise of communism. 5. The global economic crisis. The 1920s were supposed to bring recovery, but Germany struggled under reparations. Inflation spiraled out of control. By 1923, German money had become almost worthless. Workers were paid twice a day because their salaries lost value within hours. People burned money for heat because the paper was cheaper than firewood. Although things temporarily improved in the late 1920s, the situation collapsed again in 1929 when the Great Depression hit the entire world. Germany, already weak, was hit hardest. Poverty, anger, and hopelessness spread everywhere. This opened the door for extremist parties promising quick, powerful solutions. 6. The rise of fascism and extremism. As democracies struggled to solve economic problems, people turned to leaders who promised strength, unity, and national pride. In Italy, Benito Mussolini created the world's first fascist state, glorifying the military and promising to rebuild the Roman Empire. In Japan, militarists pushed the government into expansion, believing Japan needed more land and resources. In Spain, political tensions exploded into a brutal civil war, attracting support from fascists and communists worldwide. But nowhere was fascism more dangerous than in Germany. 7. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler was a former soldier who felt humiliated by Germany's defeat. He joined the small German Workers' Party and transformed it into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis. Hitler promised to break the Treaty of Versailles, to rebuild Germany's military, to restore national pride, to unite all German-speaking people, to expand Germany's territory. In times of crisis, many Germans listened. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor, and within months he turned Germany into a dictatorship. Political opponents were arrested, freedom was eliminated, and the Nazi ideology became law. Germany began rearming in secret, then openly defied the Treaty of Versailles, while other nations did nothing to stop it. 8. The failure of the League of Nations. The League of Nations, created to maintain peace, was too weak to stop aggression. It had no real military power and countries often ignored it. When Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, the League condemned the action but did nothing. When Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, the League again failed to act. Hitler watched these events and realized something important. The world was unwilling to stop aggressive nations. This encouraged him to push even further. The world's first sparks of conflict, 1931-1937, Japan, Italy, and the first signs that peace was falling apart. By the early 1930s, the world was fragile and unstable. The global economic depression had weakened governments, increased poverty, and damaged the faith people had in democracy. Into this chaos stepped countries led by aggressive, ambitious leaders who believed their nations deserved more land, more power, and more influence. Even before Europe exploded into full-scale war, the first warning signs appeared in Asia and Africa. These early conflicts showed the world that the peace created after World War I was already crumbling. 1. Japan's expansion begins. Invasion of Manchuria 1931. Japan had rapidly modernized and industrialized in the late 1800s and early 1900s, but it lacked one thing: natural resources. Japan had a strong military, powerful ambitions, and a belief that it was destined to dominate Asia. In 1931, Japanese troops staged a fake attack near a railway line in Manchuria, a region in northern China, rich in coal and resources. They used this incident as an excuse to invade. Within months, Japan controlled Manchuria. A puppet state called Manchukuo was established. The League of Nations condemned Japan, but did nothing meaningful. Japan simply walked out of the League, proving that international law was powerless. This moment showed dictators everywhere that they could break rules without punishment. 2. Italy's invasion of Ethiopia 1935. Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader of Italy, was jealous of other European empires. He wanted Italy to become a great imperial power, like Rome had been. Ethiopia was one of the few remaining independent African nations. Italy had tried to conquer it in 1896 and failed. Mussolini wanted revenge. In 1935, Italy launched a massive invasion. Modern tanks and planes were used against Ethiopian fighters, armed mostly with rifles. Italy used chemical weapons, such as poison gas. The League of Nations again failed to stop the aggression. This invasion proved something dangerous. Fascist leaders were willing to use extreme violence to expand their territories, and the world was too weak or too divided to intervene. 3. The rise of militarism in Japan. After Manchuria, Japanese militarists gained more control over the government. They promoted nationalism, emperor worship, expansion across Asia, a belief that Japan should rule the Pacific region. Japan began preparing for a much larger war. one that would eventually bring it into conflict with China, the United States, and many other nations. Germany watches and learns. Adolf Hitler closely observed Japan and Italy. He saw that the great powers, especially Britain and France, were unwilling to risk another world war. This encouraged him to push further. In 1933, Germany left the League of Nations. In 1935, Hitler publicly rebuilt the German military. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Britain and France protested, but did not act. To Hitler, this was the final proof that the Allies were weak. Germany had been a defeated country, 1918. By 1936, it was returning to military power at incredible speed. 5. The Spanish Civil War 1936 to 1939. Testing ground for dictators. Spain was divided between left-wing Republicans and right-wing nationalists. In 1936, these tensions exploded into civil war. Hitler and Mussolini supported the nationalists, led by General Francisco Franco. The Soviet Union supported the Republicans. For Germany and Italy, Spain became a place to test new weapons, a way to train pilots and soldiers, a chance to strengthen fascist influence in Europe. Events like the bombing of Guernica by the German Luftwaffe shocked the world, showing how terrifying air warfare had become. The war ended in 1939 with a fascist victory. Europe had watched a whole country collapse, but again, no united action was taken. 6. The Anti-Comintern Pact 1936. Germany and Japan signed an agreement targeting the Soviet Union. Italy joined in 1937. This was the beginning of the Axis powers, the alliance that would later fight against the Allies in World War II. 7. The weakness of peace. By 1937, 3 dictatorships were openly challenging the world. Japan taking over East Asia, Italy conquering Africa, Germany rearming and reclaiming territory. The League of Nations had completely failed. Global cooperation was breaking apart. Democracies were fearful, divided, and desperate to avoid another war. Dictators were growing stronger and more confident each year. World War II had not yet officially begun, but its foundations were now firmly laid. The world was moving toward a collision it could no longer avoid. Hitler's bold moves and Europe's slow collapse 1936-1938. Germany's rising power, the failure of appeasement, and the road toward a new conflict. By the mid-1930s, Adolf Hitler was no longer testing the waters. He was acting boldly, almost daring the world to stop him. Each year, he took steps that brought Germany closer to war, but instead of resistance, he met hesitation, fear, and compromise from the other European powers. These years were the turning point, the moment when war could have been stopped, but wasn't. 1. Germany remilitarizes the Rhineland 1936. The Treaty of Versailles had declared the Rhineland a demilitarized zone, meaning Germany was forbidden to send troops there. This was meant to protect France from a sudden German attack. In March 1936, Hitler broke the treaty by sending in German troops. Key facts: Hitler's generals were terrified. They knew France's army was stronger. Hitler gave his soldiers secret orders to retreat immediately if France responded. France did nothing. Britain urged caution. Hitler realized that the Allies were unwilling to confront him. This moment changed everything. Hitler became more confident. The German people cheered. The Nazi regime grew stronger, and Europe became more dangerous. To a Germany and Italy grow closer. Mussolini at first opposed Hitler, but after the world criticized Italy for invading Ethiopia, Mussolini turned toward Germany. In 1936, Germany and Italy formed the Rome-Berlin Axis. Japan joined later, forming the foundation of the Axis powers. From this point on, the dictators were united in their aggressive ambitions. 3. The Anschluss. Germany annexes Austria 1938. Hitler had long dreamed of uniting all German-speaking people under one Reich. Austria, a German-speaking nation, was one of his key targets. Austria's government was weak, divided, and struggling with internal conflict. Hitler used political pressure and intimidation to force Austria's leaders to surrender their independence. In March 1938, German troops crossed into Austria. Huge crowds welcomed them with Nazi salutes. A fake referendum was organized. Austria officially became part of Germany. Again, Britain and France protested, but did nothing. Hitler gained more land, more resources, more soldiers, more confidence. The final steps toward War 1939, the Nazi-Soviet pact, the invasion of Poland, and the moment World War II begins. By early 1939, Europe was in a state of extreme tension. Appeasement had failed, Germany had grown powerful, and Hitler was no longer hiding his ambitions. His next target was Poland, a country standing between Germany and the expansion of Hitler's new empire. But one massive political surprise was still to come, one that would shock the entire world and remove the last barrier to war. 1. Hitler's plan for Poland. After destroying Czechoslovakia, Hitler turned to Poland with the same strategy he had used before: create a political crisis, claim Germans were being mistreated, and demand territory. Hitler wanted the port city of Danzig returned to Germany, a highway and railway through the Polish corridor, influence over Polish foreign policy. Poland refused, and unlike previous nations, it had powerful allies. Britain and France promised protection. For the first time, Hitler's aggressive plans were being openly challenged, but Hitler believed Britain and France were bluffing. They had backed down before. Why would this time be different? 2. Europe braces for the worst. Throughout early and mid-1939, Europe prepared for conflict. Britain introduced new military measures and began evacuating children from major cities. France strengthened its borders. Poland mobilized part of its army. Germany moved closer to full war readiness. Yet Hitler still needed one thing: assurance that the Soviet Union, Germany's eastern neighbor, would not stand in his way. Then came one of the most shocking diplomatic moves in modern history. 3. The Nazi-Soviet Pact, August 1939. Germany and the Soviet Union had been enemies for years. Nazi ideology viewed communists as dangerous and inferior. The Soviet Union saw fascism as its greatest threat. No one expected these two nations to cooperate. But on August 23, 1939, the impossible happened. Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement. Both sides promised not to attack each other. The world was stunned, but the real danger was hidden in a secret part of the agreement. The secret protocol. Germany and the Soviet Union agreed to divide Eastern Europe. Poland would be split between them. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, would go to the Soviets. Finland was placed in the Soviet sphere. Hitler now had a guarantee that the USSR would not interfere if Germany invaded Poland. Stalin gained time to rebuild his weakened military after the purges. 4. Germany prepares to strike. Hitler ordered his generals to finalize the invasion plans. German propaganda began spreading lies, claiming that Poland was attacking German citizens. On August 31, 1939, German agents staged a fake Polish attack on a German radio station, dressing prisoners in Polish uniforms and killing them. This false flag operation served as Hitler's excuse. The quiet before the storm. 1939-1940. The fall of Poland, the Phoney War, and Hitler's secret preparation for the Blitzkrieg in the West. When Britain and France declared war on Germany in September 1939, millions expected a massive clash like World War I, but instead, Europe entered a strange, silent phase. The war had officially begun, yet the Western Front remained calm. Behind that calm, however, Hitler was planning something explosive. 1. Poland is crushed. The first Blitzkrieg ends. By early October 1939, Poland had fallen under the combined assault of Germany and the Soviet Union. Key consequences. Germany annexed Western Poland. The Soviet Union seized the East. Millions of Polish citizens were placed under brutal occupation. Polish soldiers who escaped fled to Britain and France to continue fighting. Hitler's Blitzkrieg had worked perfectly. Fast, shocking, and devastating. Now the world feared this new style of warfare. 2. Britain and France mobilize. After declaring war, Britain and France began preparing for a long conflict. British troops crossed the Channel to support France. Defensive positions were strengthened. Armies waited behind the massive French fortification line, known as the Maginot Line. But despite all the preparation, there was almost no fighting. 3. The Phoney War 1939-1940. From October 1939 to April 1940, the Western Front entered a period of eerie silence. Newspapers called it the Phoney War, the Sitting War, the Twilight War. Soldiers sat in trenches, played cards, and waited. Patrols were sent out, but major battles did not happen. Civilians prepared for bombings that didn't come. Behind the scenes, both sides were preparing, planning, and watching each other. Why no action? Because Hitler was busy with something else. 4. Germany turns north. The invasion of Denmark and Norway. Hitler worried that Britain might take control of Norway's ports, which Germany needed for iron ore deliveries from Sweden. Losing this resource would weaken the German war machine. So in April 1940, Germany launched Operation Weserübung. Denmark was captured within hours. Norway faced a longer fight, but eventually fell. Britain attempted to defend Norway, but failed and withdrew. Germany now controlled critical northern ports and secured its iron supply. This victory increased Hitler's confidence and expanded German naval and air power. 5. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union expands eastward. Under the secret agreement with Germany, the Soviets began expanding into their assigned territories. They invaded Finland in the Winter War 1939-1940. They pressured the Baltic states Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania into accepting Soviet occupation. They annexed parts of Romania later in 1940. The Winter War shocked the world because the small Finnish army fiercely resisted the huge Soviet force. Although the Soviets eventually won, their early failures led Hitler to underestimate the Red Army later on.